Having recently revisited an old favourite from my early science fiction days, that was Slam by A. Van Vogt, I enjoyed that so much that I thought I'd go back and read a few more of those books that first got you into the genre. I think every science fiction and fantasy writer that I've ever spoken to has those, the authors or books that they remember as being one of the reasons why they fell in love with the genre. So one of my favourite early authors was Jack Vance, and I went to read one of the early books that I loved, only to find that in the course of many moves, I've lost many books. I don't have any of the early ones that I really loved, so I ended up reading one that I hadn't read before. This is To Live Forever by Jack Vance. It's got a really nice old classic sci-fi style artwork on the cover, which I really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed the book as well. It might not be one of the ones I remember from my childhood, but Jack Vance has still got as beautiful a writing in this as I remember from the other books that I really did enjoy. So one thing that Vance does really, really well is describe societies and setups. The whole world building, he kind of wrote the book for it. And that's what we have here. We've got an amazing, intricately described society that goes into so much detail and is so immensely believable and in some ways relatable, but in many ways criticizable. And that's what Jack Vance does so well. So book is based in the city of Clarks. It's on Earth, but so far in the future that we don't have any reference point to our Earth, really. And we don't have any of that old civilization fell due to this or due to that. We just have the situation. We've got Clarks. It's a very stratified and immensely stratified society. Social success is no longer measured by wealth, or rather it is only by the wealth of longevity. So longevity has been cured, as it will, if you will. You can live forever through an elaborate cloning system whereby you make clones and you develop an affinity with them and you go on to the next clone when your body dies. However, this immortality isn't granted to everyone. It's only granted to the highest class, known as Amaranth, and in order to be accepted into that class you have to advance through all the others. He doesn't call them classes, by the way. He calls them phials, which I would assume is derived from the word phylogeny. And to further endorse the biological similarities, the first class is brood. Citizens aren't born into phials, which is a really interesting way to develop a society. They start off as nothing, and then as an adult they have to go to a particular organization and register, at which point they're admitted to the lowest level of society, which has, I think it's only got a couple of extra months of longevity over the next one, and that earliest stage is called brood. Now, people who don't register, there's no penalty, they live out their life. They're called glarks, which is apparently derived from gay lark, which I can only say dates this book more than anything else. You wouldn't use that word in this day and age. This one is copyrighted in 1956, so it's quite an old book. In a lot of ways, it doesn't feel like an old book. In terms of social commentary, it feels brand new. So most people in the society do register to advance through the file system or work up slope. Because as one advances through the files, one is given extra longevity. And the downside to this society, which you don't encounter straight away, it certainly slowly becomes clear as you learn more and more about the society throughout the book. There's no info dumps here. You get a little bit at a time and it slowly builds up until you have a fully formed notion of how this social system works. So the problem is that they've got finite space in this country or city country. It's surrounded by nomads on the outer side, I think it is, and Earth has got limited space, and so inside this particular city-state or whatever it is, they have judged how many people can live in it, and every time someone becomes an amaranth, they will basically live forever, so they're calculating a certain number of extra days for that person, and that means that a certain number of people from the lower classes get less life. So essentially, in one stage, our protagonist describes it as every time someone becomes an amaranth, one has in essence killed 2,000 people. But because this class system is earned, not born into, everyone has a hope of becoming amaranth, and everyone is working busily away to increase their slope, as they put it, move up the slope toward the amaranth by working or inventing things. But of course the competition is harsh. Everyone wants to do that, and not everyone's going to advance. So most people are completely work focused. A lot of what I've just said isn't given to you straight up in the book. You learn it as you go through. And the book starts in a really interesting suburb. So across the river from the main city, there is an area called Carnival. And basically it's this huge, elaborate, gorgeously described place, extensive place. It's got all the elements of a carnival and Rio de Janeiro and Mardi Gras. Everything you can imagine and everything you could want is in there. Citizens dress up in costumes and masks and go across the river to relieve tensions and do things that they can't do back in the proper part of the city, or might be ashamed to do, according to some people. Our story starts in Carnival, and there we meet our protagonist, whose name is Gavin Waylock, and he is the tout for a certain amusement of Carnival, and he's wearing a bronze mask so his face is invisible, and we get a slow reveal on this one. He meets up with a person he knows from his past who has registered as brood and is already moving up and is saying, "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? You have to do it now." So we find out there's a reason why he's waiting, but not what it is. After he finishes work, he hooks up with a pretty young girl. But before he hooks up with her, we know more about her than he does. She's far from a girl, and while she's pretty and claims to be a Glark like Gavin is, she is actually a newly made amaranth, fitted into her new clone and exploring her new world as a young, I think it's 19-year-old, after having spent a whole lifetime working and striving to get into the amaranth class. So we're meeting her is the start of all of Gavin's problems, really. Gavin, you see, used to be called Graven Warlock, and he became an amaranth, but bad things happened and he ended up in a fight with another amaranth. An interesting thing is, if Graven Warlock is the person's name, when he becomes amaranth he becomes the Graven Warlock, so there is only one sort of thing. Anyway, he'd become amaranth, he got into a fight with another amaranth, but because he didn't go into seclusion like most amaranths do, his clones weren't ready. So when he was cast out, he had no clone to go through to, even though the person he killed had a clone and just continued on their life merrily. So he's called a monster and a murderer because he killed someone, only the person he killed is actually still alive, whereas he has been killed, and that's fine. So there's a background to what makes the social setup interesting. And really the exciting part of this book is the social setup and the social descriptions. And one of the exciting things about it is it utilizes a lot of modern criminology theories, one of which is a core modeling system of criminology, or at least it was a few years back when I studied it, and it's about poverty. Poverty is not found to generate crime, but poverty, when it's living right next door to great wealth with no hope of obtaining it, that's when crime is generated. And that is touched at extensively in the book. Lots of other sociological and criminology theories are as well. So if you're reading this book, the science in here is social sciences rather than biological sciences. No one really knows how the clones are made. It isn't gone into. And they do have space travel, but that isn't gone into in any great extent either. So the criminology and the social commentary are the core of this book, and that's why I enjoyed it. Vance displays the inconsistencies and injustices of the society, which punishes underclasses for the same things that are condoned as long as they're done by the elite. And this really comes through in Gavin Waylock, who is an excellent and fascinating vehicle for this story. There's so much about it that I like. Character-wise, the characters are basic. While you learn a lot about Gavin, you don't learn a lot about his inner world. He comes through to the reader, in my opinion, as a very strong individual who is frustrated by the system and how the system has worked against him but fails to work against his accusers. There is a lot of time where he was waiting for 7 years before he could register as a new person. He registered as a new person and he tried to do the right thing to enter at the base level of Brood and work himself back up to Amaranth. That was his goal. However, it goes wrong because the pretty young girl he hooked up with, whose name I've forgotten. Oh, there we go. The Jacinth. Jacinth is doing her best to block him, and he's forced to go way outside the box and do things that he never planned to do to gain his goal of longevity. And in the course of doing that, he actually kind of breaks down the entire social structure and incites a riot. And it looks like the whole civilization is going to have to change one of its core precepts, that there's only a certain amount of space and that people have to die. The way people die, by the way, is by an assassination type that is similar in a way to Logan's Run, in my opinion, the book, not the movie, where when someone reaches his scheduled use-by date, assassins appear and take him away and basically kill him. So this is the same society which condones this happening to nearly everyone, that punishes a murder where the individual does not actually die. That's one of the fascinating little social conundrums and critiques that infuse all the way through this book. So yes, Jack Vance, you're as good as I remember you being. I do thoroughly recommend this. A lot of Jack Vance is series, but To Live Forever is actually a standalone. So anyone can pick it up and read it without investing. And if you like classic sci-fi and good writing, and you enjoy social commentary, I think you should.